there was no way out for me,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody was like, well, you studied, what did you like?
The 9-to-5 work culture, where we work fixed hours, is quickly becoming a thing of the past.
The structured 9-to-5 work week is disappearing.
Markus, you are the first person that I have on that has, let's go with the traditional 9-to-5.
Even though I'm well aware that you don't stay with one company anymore for 40 years, but you still feel that pressure of finding something that kind of makes you happy. Because what you want in that situation is, here are the 6 steps to find your passion, or here are the 3 steps to find your purpose and your calling in your job. And then you do that and then you have it, which obviously doesn't exist. I don't know if that's an unusual answer, but that's just what it is.
Markus.
Good morning.
Good morning indeed. I think this is definitely the earliest one I've recorded so far.
Mm-hmm.
For most of my podcasts, I start with certain preparation, but in this case, I felt like I know you enough for that not to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to start with the standard question before we get into who you are and why I know you. And that question is, are you happy?
I would say at the moment, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, there's always like a scale that's more leaning towards happy or either leaning more towards not happy. And now it's definitely leaning towards happy. Yeah.
What, in your opinion, is required to live a happy life?
I think, in my opinion, it's required to live a happy life that you build up the courage to go after what you want, no matter what that is. It's the courage to, if you want to live healthier, it's the courage to get up to go to the gym. And if you want to pursue a hobby, it's the courage to, I don't know, depends on the hobby, but even though it's raining and the circumstances aren't perfect, that you have the drive to do that anyway, because otherwise you don't have progress anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Is happiness what you should chase in life?
I would say that it's a noble cause to live by, to be happy yourself. And for me, that means not to chase it in the sense that it's too fanatic and that, that the only goal in life is to be happy, but is that you find the little things and stuff that you enjoy that actually makes you happy, that you have the self-reflection of actually realizing that in that moment, even though it was just as small as maybe getting a coffee with a good friend, to identify that as, that was actually a pretty happy situation. Let's do that more often. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you should do that then. Mm-hmm.
For this podcast, I have a guiding research hypothesis that basically means, or that is, passion gives purpose. And with that, I try to find out whether people believe whether or not the things they are passionate about, whatever that is, gives purpose to their life. Do you think, first of all, what's your thought on that hypothesis?
I think, of course, that there's a certain truth in that. But I also think that, in my opinion, you can have more than one passion. It's just things that you enjoy and that fuel whatever you're doing. And I think that if you have a purpose or if you look for one, that your passions and the things that drive you guide you towards that. Mm-hmm. So I see passions or things that you care about as a means to fulfill whatever purpose you decide was appropriate for your life.
Say that again. You see passions as?
I see passions as a means or as the motor, so to say, that drives you towards your purpose or whatever you see fit when it comes to a purposeful life.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
So what are things you're passionate about then?
I'm very passionate about assuring that other people, for instance, in a situation where friends come together and there's an evening to be enjoyed, what greatly drives me and what is a passion in that sense is that to assure that other people have a great time. When I cannot make other people laugh, or when I just can make sure that the evening, if it gets heated in some way, I don't know, to smooth that out. And just, the joy in other people's faces give me great joy as well. I don't know if that's an unusual answer, but that's just what it is. And that's one of the things. And recently I was fortunate enough to discover like photography for me as a hobby. And that is something I'm really passionate about, because I'm usually the kind of guy that tries out a couple of things a month, and 99% of the time I'm very excited about something, and then it flattens out because it didn't turn out to be that great after all. But with
Spend
that,
a fortune in the process.
Oh yeah. I usually say, let's get the best equipment there is, because I want to do it properly before I actually just go out there and try it out and see whether it is for me or not. Same happened like with the guitar. I really wanted one, and then I bought a new one because I wanted to try out the hobby, and then I literally like played once for half an hour, and I was like, nah, this is not really the thing. So I lost a couple of bucks on that, and that happened repeatedly in the past. And the funny thing there was about photography that I went the other way around, interestingly, that, for this time I thought, not again. And especially like with cameras and lenses, you can spend a fortune, which I don't have. So I thought, let's get a used one with a lens that I wouldn't have picked, but it did the trick to just try it out. And that turned out to be great. Yeah. And then, it was actually the right way around this time that after that, I got a camera that I really wanted because it turned out to be awesome. Yeah, that is something I'm really passionate about at the moment. Mm-hmm.
I noticed you didn't necessarily mention your job. Would you say you're passionate about it?
Yes. But I'm passionate about my job because of the things that it produces. I'm working in the strategy department, so to say, of a large agency here in Hamburg, which is great. And it was a rookie, not a rookie, it was a bumpy ride to get there. And I really like almost every aspect of the job, but I especially love what it produces and what it fuels, which is basically making brands as authentically experienceable as possible on every touch point, so to say. And the people I work with and the customers we work with and the spirit that we have at work, that's something that really gets me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The reason why I ask is obviously because you are the first person that I have on that has, let's go with the traditional 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. And obviously this is like one side of it. And I know because you are one of my best friends that I know the struggle you have had as well with the quarter life crisis and finding that thing that you are passionate about work, but also the challenges outside. So usually I have the quarter life crisis question a little bit more towards the end, but we're gonna bring it to the front and ask you why or what was your quarter life crisis like?
Yeah, my quarter life crisis was exactly about that, about the job thing, like having that calling or having that job that really fulfills you on every level, that when you love your job you never have to work a day in your life. And that never occurred to me until a good year or 1.5 after my studies. And that was something I greatly struggled with, because especially here in Germany, at least for me, it was the case that after you're done with the main education, like for instance Abitur, Fachabitur, after that into an apprenticeship or into internships and then into studies, you should have figured it out. At least that's what the culture tells you to do. But when you've either never really thought about it or it never really clicked entirely, then that's a huge problem, because that's something that not that many people are talking about. And it was always the case that I liked certain parts of the things that I did, but not not the entire thing. At least not, I didn't love it as much that I would say, okay, I love like 80%, and the last 20, well, that's fine if you don't like the entire thing.
Yeah.
But I never had that. I like, I don't know, 30%, 40%, something like this. And I, tried doing like bartending and being a chemist and a cook. And then I was a travel agent, which I did an apprenticeship in, and I liked, but not loved. And then I went into the studies then I went a year away, first of all, as an au pair in America. And after that, I started studying where I met you. And I thought, well, if I haven't quite figured it out yet, but luckily we chose a study that basically lets you try out the entire offer that a company has. So you can do marketing and bookkeeping and sales and all that. So I thought, well, it's a broad studies, but at least I get to try out everything, and then I can decide. And that's the hope I went or I took into the studies before. And then after the studies, I wasn't really more informed, I got to know all that, and then there were exciting parts and there were not so exciting parts, and I got to exclude some of it, which is also good, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I couldn't pinpoint.
That's it.
That's exactly it. Yeah, absolutely. Which annoyed me a lot. And obviously, the more you think about it, the more you expect from your job. And sometimes it also gets into a sphere where a job can't fulfill what you're looking for. But I was never able to say, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do, no matter how the team is or the company is or the context is, but that's the actual work I want to do. And sorry if this is the really long answer.
No, go on.
And the problem with that is if you are in that situation where even after your studies you can't really pinpoint what you want to do, and you also don't want to try out 10 different studies and you don't have the financial means, then it's really exhausting to talk to other people who have found their calling. Because as much excited I am for these people, awesome, and I want that too, but they either want what they do since they were 7, and they were weirdly always talking about, I don't know, being a teacher.
Yep.
And they played being a teacher as a child, and then they pursued that exactly like that, and they're happy as hell. Remarkable. And there are also the other people that you talk to, this is the second group, that accidentally stumbled upon it, which also doesn't get you anywhere. Because what you want in that situation is, here are the 6 steps to find your passion, or here are the 3 steps to find your purpose and your calling in your job. And then you do that, and then you have it, which obviously doesn't exist. And then you're trapped in this situation, because I was at a point where I, at least in my head, wasn't able to try out 10 more new things or do 10 internships in a year in different fields and then narrow it down further and further. So I was very, I wouldn't say depressed, that's a heavy word, but I was very trapped in that situation in that sense, because there was no way out for me, because everybody was like, well, you studied, what did you like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked some of it.
Why do you feel like you need to find one specific segment of a company? Why not try out a bunch of different ones?
Yeah, that's something I thought about during the studies as well. I think it has to do a little with my upbringing and my childhood, parents, family. Awesome. I couldn't be more thankful for that. But I also grew up in a world, I'm turning 30 this year. Don't know how I feel about that. But I was brought up in an environment where my mom stayed home and she took care of the house and the kids, and my dad went to work, but at the same place that he's still at now. So it's the same employer and sort of the same job. He now leads the team, but in the broad sense, and he's going to retire in that job. And when you brought up into that in that situation, then you kind of also take some of that with, and also the pressure it comes with to look for something that you're comfortable with for roughly 45 years.
Yep.
Which today is nuts, obviously, but that when you're brought up in that environment, then you can't throw that away and say, oh well, if sales doesn't work out in 2 years, I try bookkeeping.
Yeah.
And I'm also not that kind of person.
No.
I think so, and that, even though I'm well aware that you don't stay with one company anymore for 40 years, at least not in the broad sense, but you still feel that pressure of finding something that kind of makes you happy, or that you don't hate, like that. It's Monday again, great,
Yeah. So why was sort of being an entrepreneur and starting your own thing never an option?
Because I think, and that's also, I think I take from the family I grew up in, is that I like a certain stability and a certain safety in what I do. And although I sense sometimes some entrepreneurial spirit in the way that, I don't know, a little side hustle, wouldn't hurt. And I would like that, especially when it's about something that 100% passions you and drives you. Because when you work in a job context, obviously that's the goal, but there's always a certain degree of, I don't know, 5%, 10% where you're like, yeah, okay. That's which don't even have to be terrible things, but not things that you're like, hell yes.
Yeah.
And I think when you have some entrepreneurial spirit, or you even are an entrepreneur, then you can basically pick what like fuels you entirely. And I think that's then in that sense a little more easy to do on the weekend, especially if you have that safety net. I'm sure there are also downsides to that, and I'm sure that you would go much harder at it if that was the only option.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me that would be the perfect world someday, that you have something on the side that you can do on the weekend, maybe also earn some extra money, but still have the stability of the main job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on the hustle porn stars that you have these days? People who are constantly screaming about working harder and eat, or when they are sleeping, I'm up, blah blah blah, start a company, all this stuff. I think that comes along with the pressure that you speak of, that finding what you are passionate about is in that same boat, and maybe you don't feel pressured into starting a company, but still pressured into finding whatever it is that you're passionate about.
On the one hand, I like the energy, if that's real, on social media.
Yep.
Because I think in a lot of cases they communicate the journey and the way to their goal as much as the goal itself, which I think is great. Because you don't only see the end result, but you see, people are being in the mud and working for it, and it didn't happen like that. And them showing the approach and the way to it, I think is great. But on the other hand, I also think that they portray the image of, if you only work hard enough and long enough, that you definitely make it. And I don't like that definitely point. Because it's much more likely that you make it, obviously, because you work very hard for it. And if it's something that you do good or do better than others, or you are, in the right niche, of course, then you can make it, whatever that means. But I don't like the idea of them not talking about the downsides for once. And also the fact that what happens if that doesn't work? What happens if you're going really hard at it for 2 years, really passionate, actually good to great content, but just doesn't, the flip doesn't switch. Mm-hmm. What happens then? And you've already worked hard, and they think
switch doesn't flip.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The flip doesn't switch. Yeah, the switch doesn't flip. Yeah, exactly. And And that's what I find a little bit annoying. I get that it's much easier and much more exciting to talk about the great stuff, hustle and work hard and all that. But I think it also couldn't hurt if they say, here are 2 strategies that you can follow if it doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what I think sometimes is, a little exhausting when you hear the gazillionth influencer.
Do you ever feel bad as a result of these hustle porn stars, in the sense like if you're not doing enough or something?
Sometimes I do. But I think that obviously has a little to do with it being the truth. So one could do more.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it also has a lot to do with that the social media or fear of missing out effect. Even the greatest influencers who have great pictures from Bali, someday will lie on the couch with a bag of chips and watch TV, scrolling through Instagram, wishing to be the influencers they see then in Turkey or somewhere else, if you take travel as the narrative. So that comes a lot with social media as well, that you want to be the other person because the environment they're portraying themselves in is awesome, which obviously is just, I don't want to call it a facade for everyone. There are great people out there, but in the broad mass, there are also a lot of people who just film themselves 30 times in a row in front of a pool.
And also those people have bad days, no?
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. And that is something that you have to take into account too. Mm-hmm. I think. Yeah.
As far as the studies goes, obviously we studied together international business. To what extent do you feel like your study prepared you for how you are now?
I think greatly, but not because of the curriculum itself. I think what we've learned there, valuable, definitely, but because of the fact that it was so international with so many cultures, and that there was very little information, which is just great for German people. We hate information and knowing all the facts.
Yeah.
That was something that greatly prepared me for what I'm doing right now, because we were, as you know, sometimes thrown into these modules. There was an opening lecture, and then there was, okay, you have 10 weeks, see ya. And then there was obviously lectures in between, but when you start the project, who you're talking to, what are the companies that you work with, who does what, who holds it all together, deadlines and exams and all that. And there was very little information that we were given from the lecturers and teachers, which in Germany most of the time is not the case. You get every information, how many pages, what's the deadline, and so on. What are the variables that I can take into account? And there you get nothing.
Yep.
Which was in hindsight awesome. At the time, obviously crazy, because you felt like you were overthrown with everything immediately, because it was also so much that you had to do. So in that sense, the studies prepared me greatly for what I'm doing right now. That I'm not freaked out by the fact that I don't have all the information, which is, I think, a skill, so to say, or a mindset that is very valuable, especially in nowadays times. Because I've read a great quote somewhere that said that skill directs behavior in known situations, and for everything else there's your intuition, and there are your emotions, and there is your character guides your behavior then, and how you accustom to situations that you don't know. And in today's world, or not even in today's world, in the job that I'm doing in strategic work for so many different customers and situations, empathy and that skill to not be freaked out by not having all the information is very valuable.
Yeah.
Because you don't go into panic mode and flip on your back and that's it. But you are comfortable in this situation that you're like, okay, let's settle in, see what information we do have, and then see how we go from there. And I think when you are in a studies, or when you've only learned in your life that you have all the information always, and then you're in a situation that is new, that has never been there before, then you're not going to react, solution oriented.
Yeah.
Then you're going to freak out and then rely on the past, which is not going to work because the situation is new. And then experience doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
And that's something I took away greatly from the studies. Yeah.
The reason why I obviously ask about the studies is, I guess I'm curious whether or not, if you would have started with this questioning of what you want to do and sort of trying to navigate towards what you think will make you happy, whether you either would still have done the studies then, or if you would have done a different studies, if you sort of know now what you know now about yourself, if you would have known that then, how you think that might have differed, or if it even would have.
I think it obviously helps before you start studying that you at least pick a field that might excite you. So for instance, you have, I don't know, like the social category, then you have like the business category, then you have like the craftsmanship category, something like this, and that you can start to narrow down this huge tree of what am I going to do in my life. And I think that I would still have studied what I have studied, because it just gives you a great perspective on everything there is. And that is still, the case. That is still good. In my case, it was just annoying because I didn't know like any direction, not even like an industry or a field or whatever. So that was annoying. But I still would have chosen that field of studies because I wanted to study internationally, like in English. And I also wanted to go to an international campus.
Yeah.
So it helps if you've narrowed it down before you study to at least a field, and the more variables you can put onto that are just adding value and not taking anything away from what you think your passion is, great. Like, okay, it's business, and it's international business because I like the international aspect. It's in the Netherlands because they have great programs and, I don't know, design-based education and all that. And they try to think of education not as I'm telling you what to do as a teacher, and this is in the lecture and this is in the exam, you study and then you get the grade, which you don't take anything away from.
Yep.
But they have a little bit outside of the box education, something like this.
So obviously you spoke about finding your hobby, photography. Is there any ambition at all to sort of turn that into a side hustle? And the reason why I ask, not to start pushing you into starting a side hustle.
Yeah.
No, but the reason why I ask is because also hobbies, I think, sometimes get taken out of context, and a lot of people feel like they need to turn their hobby into their business. And that's why I'm curious if there's any ambition to that at all, or keep it as it is. And also how that hobby sort of brings enjoyment into your life.
So to the first question, like whether I want to turn it into a business, I think, at least from the perspective I'm in now, I think that's something that you always have to say, because things change, life changes you, and nothing's indefinite anymore. I think from the perspective that I'm in now, I at least love to do photography or like to take photos in a certain way. And because you always have to consider what your target group wants, if you have identified one. And I imagine the way I do photography is not the way they want the pictures, then that's something that would annoy me quite much if I'm turning that into a business. Because then I have to kind of sell the photos that I don't want to take because that is liked by the target group. And in that case, if I figure that out one day and it turns into more of a pain than into, hey, I'm getting money for my passion, and people are excited, then I think I would stop. But that is obviously speaking now. But if I would only have to tweak it slightly, that if I love to take pictures that way and they want this, that's fine. But if they want this because that's what everybody else is doing, then I don't think the world needs then, in that sense, yet another mediocre photographer or amateur, So I don't want to exclude the possibility right now. I don't think it's an option because I just started out in my regular job and I want to put my efforts mainly into there, and then photography is just something on the weekend. So I don't want to spend the time also on the weekend into turning that into a business. But at some point, why not?
As an outsider who has a few friends or people that are chasing or like have entrepreneurial things going on, what do you see as an outsider that are potential downsides to chasing their passion?
I think a downside I can imagine is that, yes, you can manage your own time, but that doesn't mean that you only work 2 hours where others work 8 because you can manage it yourself. It actually means that you work more than others because you also have that drive inside of you and you want to make it a success. That and that also comes along with sacrifices on the other end of time, which is then, I don't know, friends or relationships or even hobbies that you kind of like, but you want to get the business off the ground and ready and started. And then you sacrifice that for that. And I think that is one, I can at least imagine, is one downside of being an entrepreneur, which obviously you chose yourself, but you're still allowed to not like it, you know? That I can imagine. Absolutely.
You obviously recently switched to the company that you're working for. A lot of people that work 9 to 5s that are in this sort of pursuit of finding something they're super passionate about, they work for a company for the sake of their mission or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. Was that at all ever a question for you? And if so, did you find that, I guess, in your current position?
Like if I ever formulated a mission or if I ever thought about making one for myself?
Well, no. The reason why people, I guess, in 9 to 5 jobs say, "Oh, I found something I'm super passionate about," is not always, but 9 times out of 10 because they really resonate with the mission that they are trying to fulfill
from the company.
From the company, indeed. Yeah.
That's definitely something I looked into when I was looking for another job, but is not necessarily something that is a dominating factor in either including or excluding a company from the pool.
Yeah.
So
what are the dominating factors?
The dominating factors are, if you don't know anyone at the company yet, so you have to go purely by what they present themselves as on the internet or on other channels, then I think the dominating factors are how they portray their people. Mm-hmm. So I go on LinkedIn and other social media platforms to look into profiles. Do they post recently? Do they want to post recently? Do they want to post a lot about what they do? And do they strike me as passionate people there? Because I think no matter how passionate you are, if the environment that you work in is crap, then at some point you're like, yeah, I'm still passionate about what I do, but it's terrible here, and I have to leave. Yeah. So I'm looking into that, and obviously how long these people work there, taking into account that nobody works there 45 years anymore. But in today's world, 5 years is equals 20 years. Yeah, exactly. So something like that. And the other thing is that when you do get an interview, I try to rely on my gut. Mm-hmm. Because gut decisions or decisions based on emotional responses from other people to you are, in my opinion, the most profound when you look for an employer. Because obviously you have to kind of like what you do there from 9 to 5. But I think it's much more important that you are comfortable with the people you do that work with. At least, from a 9 to 5 perspective. And because in the case of my current employer, that clicked right away. I did like a digital interview via Zoom, I think, on a Tuesday, and then they said they're gonna, let me know next week whether I can pursue further. And then they called me the next day whether I want to come in on Thursday that week or Friday, within the same week, which was already great. And then I went there for just a coffee, and the people there made me immediately forget that I'm in an interview situation.
Yeah.
And that is awesome, because obviously you do a little theater as an interviewee, but also as an interviewer. Not everything they say about the company is so great as they say it is.
Yeah, unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, exactly. But they made me forget that I'm in that situation where I supposedly have to be smart the entire time and say something awesome to distinguish myself from other candidates. And that wasn't the case at all, because it was a situation where we basically sat like this, had coffee, and talked for an hour. And after 5 minutes, we were talking about random things.
Yeah.
Like, if you were a chocolate, what kind of chocolate would you be?
Yeah.
And because of the fact that they also asked these questions, which actually make you think, or also, give you the chance of, I don't know, be funny or be a little bit more relaxed in the situation, is just great.
Yeah.
Because then you can actually see what a person is like. I mean, of course, not with that question particularly, but with questions alike.
Yeah.
And that's something I really loved. Yeah.
So would you then say that you figured out your quarter life crisis?
I think I have figured out the quarter life crisis in the sense that I know better how to handle it when it comes up at some point again. So let's say that for any reason, some of the big factors in my life are not as good anymore, then I know how to handle that. For instance, I learned to talk to friends much more often about these things, because I tend to just work that out myself. But now I can articulate that a little better and get an opinion from them, which is great. And I got to learn that when some of these things fall away for any reason, then it's not the end of the world, and that you are just, if you reflect upon yourself, deal with that a little easier, instead of standing in front of the huge mountain that says, what am I going to do with my life? So I don't think I've checked it off, but I think I could handle it better if it comes up again, if that makes sense.
Do you have any advice as to what someone who is starting out in that quarter life crisis situation could do to handle it better?
I think there are approaches that you could take that at least narrows it down. So for instance, sit down and make a list and think about what you've previously done, no matter if it's like a holiday job or an internship, and what got you excited about that, even if it's just small parts, even if it is the people there. Because if it's always the people there, then that's obviously a dominating factor no matter what you do in life. That's great to write down what you really want, and everything else will you learn when you do stuff and when you get to know things. And the other part is to talk to people. I think also things like experience reports or documentaries and all that's great. But I think when talking to friends, or even your parents' friends or your parents, they can give you some advice from the I was doing it perspective, and not from the I also read about the stuff perspective.
Yeah.
So you get like a hands-on almost review of what you want to do.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, and that's a little frustrating, is that you only truly find out whether that's something for you or not if you do it in the end. And that's something that nothing can replace.
No.
In that sense, to actually be there and see, on paper it looked great, but now that I'm doing it, boring as hell.
I think that I'm already at the last question.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, what does the future hold for Markus?
Oh boy. Yeah, good question. I hope that I can keep the stuff that currently makes me happy, such as my friends, my girlfriend, most of all my job, obviously, and my hobbies. But what does the future hold? No clue, actually. But that's, in my opinion, that's fine, as long as you still have, that drive to try out new things, or the courage to not do things also, which is also fine, and not be so distracted by whatever is out there,
I want to thank you for your time. I think it was very exciting to get a 9-to-5 perspective on things. Super loved what you said, and thanks so much.
Thanks you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a great experience, and great to be here.